To the Onfire show. This is your host Daryl Brooks. I am live. Yes, today I am live, and I have a great show today. I have Gregory Wrightstone from Inconvenient Facts, and he's coming on right now. Matter of fact, he's on time, and waiting for Gregory Wrightstone, and I'm improving him on. Gregory Wrightstone. He is the Inconvenient Facts author of a great book, talked about climate change. And hey, Greg, are you there? Come on. This is your host, Daryl Brooks. This is the Onfire show. And we have a great show today. We're going to talk about climate. And it's important to talk about these serious issues because, I think that the world needs to know and about the truth about what's really happening. And hey, Gregory Wrightstone.
How are you?
All right. Are you all right? You working?
Yes, I'm good.
Okay. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm going to turn off one of these lights, though.
Okay.
Are we okay here?
Yeah, you're fine.
All right.
So I met you at CPAC this past Saturday. What were you doing there at CPAC?
Well, I've got a new book I just published.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't been to CPAC for a number of years, but we just published a new book, Inconvenient Facts. The science that Al Gore doesn't want you to know.
Yes, the science that Al Gore doesn't want you to know. Tell us,
made some great contacts at CPAC.
Oh yeah, definitely. And when I saw you at CPAC, I had to invite you on the show because you're such a great book. I was doing some reading about your book and some interviews I've seen you on, and I think you did a lecture. I was looking at the lecture; it was awesome. So tell us about your book. Tell the audience watching now about your book. Inconvenient Facts.
Yeah, let's start with who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a geologist. I've spent more than 35 years studying the various Earth's processes, what's happening with the Earth. And I started this. I didn't start out to write a book. I actually started out to seek the truth. I knew as a geologist that some of the things we're being told are just incorrect.
Yeah.
And expected that other things were. So that led me into a search for the truth. And it was that search for the truth that led to this book.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, frankly, what I found was just shocking.
Mm-hmm.
In that much of what we're being told about climate change, the facts, the science, and the data just don't support it. The facts show us that much of what we're being told about the cataclysmic effects that are pending are just not recognized in the what's actually happening today.
Yeah,
they're all based.
Yeah, and Inconvenient Facts, Inconvenience, that talked about Al Gore, and tell us about Al Gore and his documentary that he was so praised. I think he won an Oscar and a Grammy, I think, for Inconvenience. Tell us.
Yeah, that was one of the big things that drove this climate alarmist argument.
Mm-hmm.
He's made some pretty outrageous claims over the years of tens of millions of people being displaced due to sea level.
Mm-hmm.
He's made several of those outrageous claims in the movie as well that have not come to pass.
Yeah. It's some of the. Go ahead.
The only science course he ever took in college was called natural science, and he got a D in it.
And he also was the one who started the internet.
Yeah, right.
You know, one of the things that Al Gore said 8 years ago, he said 8 years ago, as Vice President Gore, the polarized caps will be gone by now. 8 years ago, he said that. And I'm sure that scared a lot of people, but the polar caps are still there.
Yeah, well, that's nothing more outrageous than the things we hear every day. If you get in your Google alerts, you'll hear of similarly outrageous claims of polar bears going extinct, claiming that the forest fires in California were linked to climate change. And we can talk, actually, it's pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The forest fires in California, there was actually a portion of those that may well be linked to climate change, but not in the way they predict, which should be pretty interesting. But yeah, a lot of these predictions just haven't come to pass. The UN predicted in 2005 that there'd be 50 million climate refugees from low-lying islands in the Pacific and the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, I point out that I chose 4 of the worst of the islands that were supposed to be underwater by now, and found that their populations had actually drastically increased.
Wow.
That actually people are flocking to the islands, not fleeing from them.
Mm-hmm. They also said about, Miami, I mean, they talked about Miami would be underwater by now.
Yeah, that's the rate of sea level is increasing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's been pretty stable since the early 1800s. When we were coming out of the little ice ages, when sea level started to rise, glaciers started their current retreat.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got I just gave a talk at the University of Oklahoma yesterday via webinar, and showed an example of Fort Lauderdale from 1960, the opening credits of Where the Boys Are,
Mm-hmm.
and showed it compared to one taken in 2016 from the same vantage spot, and they're completely identical.
Oh, wow. And so, where have you been doing a lot of your seminars at? What colleges? Are there colleges, universities?
Well, I did a webinar for University of Oklahoma for their energy law yesterday. Very well received,
Mm-hmm.
very well received. I've not spoken at any universities. I've spoken at area local groups in West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, which my home turf is Pittsburgh here. In fact, I spoke over in Lebanon, PA. There was a left-wing history professor that attended my talk. After my talk, he started slamming me on social media pretty badly.
Wow.
And, well, that's okay. I can take it. So I got his email address and offered to come down to speak to his class and present his class. I said, when I'm done, I can go half an hour, 45 minutes. When I'm done, tear me apart. If there's something factually incorrect that I have said, let's talk about it. Tell me about it. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. He got back to me and said that I would no sooner invite you to talk to my class as I would someone promoting the theory of a flat earth. And this is the best part. He said, I don't want my students exposed to this kind of science. This kind of science.
What are they afraid of? What are they afraid of?
The truth. They're afraid of the truth. What they have done and what I've seen, it's really the greatest probably detriment we've seen is a near destruction of the scientific process. Mm-hmm. With just taking kernels of truth. And we'll go into this tonight as we go along. But I deal in the real world. Mm-hmm. I don't deal in conjectures, which is what the climate apocalypse proponents are proposing. When you hear of flooded islands, increasing forest fires, droughts, high mortality rates increasing. These are all based on climate models that can't model climate.
Oh, okay.
Instead of that, I look at what's actually happening today, and I'll say, well, we'll go into some of this. I say if we've had 100 or so years of increasing temperature and increasing CO2, should we not see some evidence of the calamities that they're proposing? I would say we should see some evidence. Rather, one of the overarching themes of the book is that rising temperatures and increasing CO2 are having a significantly beneficial effect on the Earth's ecosystems and on the human condition. Mm-hmm. We're seeing improvements in the Earth and its ecosystems. We're seeing lengthening lives. We're seeing lives being saved by global warming. We're seeing more food production. Those are all good things, but they're not reported.
Wow.
They report the disasters and the predictions, which we haven't seen yet, of pending climate apocalypse.
Mm-hmm. So when you go to these seminars and you go to speak to different groups, what are some of the questions that they like to ask you? Some of the serious questions about our climate?
They've all been pretty educated. I had a chance to speak down in Morgantown, West Virginia, a couple of months ago, actually before the book was published, to a group of geologists at a convention, all scientists. And the main thing that I got after the talk, people coming up to me and vigorously shaking my hand, thanking me for speaking the truth. Mm-hmm. Really didn't get any pushback from them. Most geologists I know, in fact, virtually all of them, not all, virtually all of them believe as I do that CO2 is having a slight warming effect on the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
But the main driver of increased temperature we've seen, which is about 0.8 of a degree centigrade from the last 100 or 150 years, is from natural drivers, the same drivers that have been driving temperature for the last 10,000 years and the last 600 million years. Those same drivers didn't suddenly cease functioning at the beginning of the 20th century.
Oh, okay. Now, they talk about fossil fuel. And, we've been using fossil fuel, I guess, through the 19th century. And, some people say that could be an issue with global warming. What do you feel about that?
Well, the main driver of increase CO2 has started increasing. We've increased about 120 parts per million in the last 150 years or so. And we're at there's only a couple numbers your viewers will need to know.
Okay.
400 parts per million. That's where we're at right now with CO2. Okay. We've increased it from 280 to 400. So that's about a 40% increase. And it's almost entirely due to man's contributions. And the majority of that is burning fossil fuels. However, I'm going to stress that the rising CO2 is having a negligible effect and fairly benign effect on temperature. And it's leading to very positive effects on the Earth's ecosystems. And that's a big thing. And when we talk about CO2, people talk about CO2 having it's a dangerously high levels. Again, we're at 400 parts per million. Prior to our current geologic period, the average CO2 level was 2,600 parts per million. That's 6.5 times where we are today. CO2 levels were at 8,000 parts per million at the highest level. And these are not dangerous levels. Submarines commonly exceed 8,000 parts per million on the submarines, and that's not dangerous. That's 20 times our current rate of 400.
Oh, wow. And also, they talk about the ocean is warming, especially in deep levels of the ocean. And, you've been talking about that and questioning, is that really the truth from these globalists, people that supports global warming?
Well, the ocean is warming along with the atmosphere. There's no doubt about that. But it's not runaway warming. It's not anything.
It's not just going to heat up, like bubble up underwater. Things are just fish are going to die. Well, you wake up in the morning and dead fish and animal. Yeah,
well, maybe Leonardo DiCaprio's next movie might show that, but it wouldn't be true.
Oh, okay.
So there has been warming of the ocean. They call it the SST, surface sea temperatures that are measured. And the ocean's the main driver of CO2. Most of your listeners probably don't know that during ice ages, CO2 levels drop, and sometimes to precipitously low levels, because cold water, it's counterintuitive, but cold water holds more CO2 than warm water. If you can imagine, you're having a liter jar of ginger ale in your refrigerator, take it out, open it up, and it'll just kind of go, right? Take that liter jar of ginger ale, put it on your picnic table in August and open it up, and it'll be a volcano. And that's because the warmer ginger ale, just like water, will expel the CO2.
Oh, okay.
So during the warming periods like we're in now, we've been in one for about 11,000 years, CO2 increases. During the ice ages, CO2 falls, and actually during the last ice age, CO2 levels fell to the lowest level in Earth's history.
Wow.
It was 100 dangerously low. It was 182 parts per million at the end of the last ice age. And why is that dangerous? At 150 parts per million, plant life can't survive. We became within 32 parts per million of the end of all plant life and all higher life on Earth. Now that's a climate apocalypse.
Wow.
That's something, it's not an imaginary, speculative, little bit of danger we're going to see that's predicted by the climate alarmists. And there's no guarantee since we started adding CO2, if we hadn't added CO2, that during the next ice age, we wouldn't have fallen below that 150 parts per million.
Now these
one of the most dangerous charts in the book, one of the scariest, is a chart of 140 million years of CO2 data that I capture. And it's almost a straight line from 4,000 down to where we are now. I mean, it was headed right to that line of death of 150 parts per million.
Wow. Now, these global alarmists, is there I guess they're organized organizations and individuals is there a reason why they're so extremely want to push this global warming issue? And Al Gore, past I guess 10 to 15 years. Is it?
Yeah, boy, that's it's when we talk about this, those and I that are the others of my I that are skeptics. By skeptics, I mean of a catastrophic effects of human-caused global warming. We almost sound like not extremists, but what do you call it? The conspiracy theorists. Supposedly we've got a 97% consensus. We're saying they're all wrong, and that's not actually the case. And I devote a whole chapter in my book to that. And again, that's Inconvenient Facts, the science that Al Gore doesn't want you to know. And before we go any farther, I can say you can buy it at inconvenientfacts.xyz. Mm-hmm. And you can buy it using a promo code of 1776 to get $5 off. So it's inconvenientfacts.xyz.
And your name Gregory Wrightstone. You can
it is.
Yeah, you can check. You can Google him and check on YouTube.
Yeah, I've been told I've got the perfect name for a geologist, Wrightstone. But yeah. I've got a guy. There's a climatologist at NOAA that studies hurricanes that I use in the book as one of the sources. Mm-hmm. His name is Christopher Landsea. Mm-hmm. So again, we've got a great name for a climatologist.
Wrightstone at Landsea. Yeah.
Landsea. Right. But where were we? We got diverted there.
Yeah. Now we want to talk. I want to talk to you about hurricanes. And we have the big one, Katrina and Hurricane Harvey, and are we looking at these massive hurricanes that are causing a lot of damage? Now, global warming especially pertains to hurricanes. Where is that?
Yeah. I was just on. I was invited on Fox and Friends, interviewed by Peter Hegseth of Fox and Friends. I was invited on there 3 weeks before the book was published. Mm-hmm. I didn't really want to go on without the book being published, but if Fox and Friends calls you up and say, we want you on the air, you got to go. Yeah, you go. So, but they wanted me to talk. That was right after Harvey landed down in Houston. And we had 3 major hurricanes that made landfall, and that was unusual. It was unusual only in effect that we hadn't had any major landfalling hurricanes in the United States for 12 years. NOAA's been keeping records on that for back to 1850.
Explain to NOAA. Who is NOAA?
National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association, I believe.
Oh, okay.
But it's the federal government climate group, mm-hmm. And they take a lot of my data in the book comes straight from groups like that. It's my data and the facts and the charts are beyond a sale. Mm-hmm. I've gotten some pushback on my interpretations, but the facts I show are absolutely correct. And so we went 12 years before Harvey made landfall with no hurricanes. The longest period since 1850 where that happened was back in the 1860s, where we had gone 8 years. So the unusual fact is that we were in a very, very long time and long-term period with no major landfalling hurricanes. And even the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the primary climate change organization, mm-hmm. that promotes this theory of human catastrophic warming, even they agree that hurricanes are not increasing. But you go into the National Geographic, you go to, any number of those of the National Resources Defense Council, they all predict that hurricanes are increasing. In the book, I capture quite a few charts on hurricanes showing that there's a pretty good case that could be made that hurricanes are actually insignificant. Well, maybe not significant, but they're definitely declining. Mm-hmm. And the gentleman I quoted, Christopher Landsea, he looked at the effect of power of hurricanes, the speed of hurricanes.
Okay.
Because National Geographic and the alarmists can't argue with the data. The data clearly shows that hurricanes are not increasing in number. So they've grabbed onto this theory that, well, they're declining in number, but they're increasing in intensity. Mm. Okay. So Christopher Lancy, again from NOAA, is a distinguished person that studies this. He agreed. He said that a Category 5 hurricane, such as Katrina, would increase about 1 to 2% in wind speed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, that means that I don't think I would be able to tell the difference between 162 and 163 miles an hour. If you're in a house, there's no way you're going to say that. And he agreed. He said it's below their capabilities of measurement. So there's no significant increase in intensity,
mm-hmm.
and there's certainly no increase in the number of hurricanes. And we see a similar trend with tornadoes. 2016 ended as the second lowest number of tornadoes in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
2013 had the lowest number. So we've had, just in the last few years,
mm-hmm.
the lowest number of tornadoes that we've seen that they've measured. And they go back to the 1950s.
Wow. You know, one of the things that I had told someone you was coming on the show, and they had asked me to ask you a question. And
sure.
You know, it's one of these conspiracy questions, and like federal government conspiracy questions. Is there any way that you can intensify a hurricane unnaturally, like send certain things in the air, or there were planes that could spread seeds? Or I'm sure you've heard that before. That is there anything way possible?
The only thing I can imagine would maybe we could send Nancy Pelosi, drop her in the middle. We could add some of that extra hot air. It might intensify.
That was good.
Barring Nancy Pelosi, no, that's not possible. That's not possible.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm sorry I'm moving around here. I'm trying to get out of the.
Yeah, I was asked that question about hurricanes, and I said, you know, I didn't know, I couldn't tell you, but he had told me to ask you that question, you know, especially hurricanes, and you know, and it's true that a lot of these hurricanes are intensifying, getting stronger, and
that's hard to document.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to document, and so when we see these hurricanes coming, and so what is the future of the weather? I mean, if you can see some anomalies, things that are happening, you know, what do you see as the future of the weather in the next 10 to 15 years? Or you know, are we playing? So we're not going. So no parts of the country is going into water. You know, it's the ice, the polar ice will not be melting all the way. What do you see as the future for our world, you know, and any of the problems that may have?
Well, let me use one of my favorite quotes is from Yogi Berra.
Mm-hmm.
He said, making predictions is really tough,
yeah,
especially about the future. So, you know, I love that because it is. I think what we should do is look at what's happened in the past. And if we look over the last 10,000 years since the end of the last ice age, what we've seen we're in a warming trend that brought us out of what was called the Little Ice Age, the horrific Little Ice Age.
Mm-hmm.
Horrible low cold temperatures, famines, large depopulation events. 600,000 people died in 1 year in France. Half the population of Iceland died. This was back in the 16 and 1700s.
1700s, yeah.
Right, 1500s, because they came out of the medieval warm period was the high Middle Ages, much warmer than today.
Mm-hmm.
We look at the other warming periods through time, we see that the other warming periods all had higher rates of warming than we're at right now, and they all ended at significantly higher temperatures than we have right now. So just based on that, you could probably surmise that that we'll probably have another possibly 60 or 100 or 150 years of warming before it goes into the cold events, next cold period. And one of the interesting parts of the book I have is the strong relationship between the rise of great civilizations, the rise of empires, the rise of technology, culture, and the arts, the rise of that during warming periods. And then when it got cold, really bad things happened.
Yeah.
There was consistent famines, disease, mass depopulations. And then when it got warm again, we'd have We'd have great civilizations and technology rise up.
How,
So we're in the benefit of a warming period right now. And one of the main reasons is during a warming period that you can have, you can grow a lot of crops and you can feed your population. So if you're emperor and you've got an empire and all of a sudden you can't feed your subjects, that's a problem. You're going to have riots. You're going to have unrest. You saw that with the Roman Empire, and one of the main reasons the empire fell, it's alleged, is the Germanic peoples coming down out of the north, which actually may have been pushed to the south due to the increase in cold of the impending Dark Ages.
and how do a government or countries prepare for certain things like that? What happened?
Well, they would build up feedstocks. If you remember Egypt and Moses,
yes.
He was in charge of the stocks. You know, those empires are the ones that were smart would build up. But there's really nothing we can do. And if the cold comes again, and it will, there's not much we can do if we can't grow enough crops to feed our population. And so warm is good, cold is bad. And when we go into the next ice age, it's going to be horrific. It will be virtually all of Canada and most of the northern United States will have to be abandoned due to ice. Up to 150 million people will need to be resettled. So maybe,
well, you know,
if we look at it in that way, maybe we could say Donald Trump's building his wall on the wrong border. Because, man, there's going to be like 80 million Canadians coming south.
You know, I was watching.
We should welcome them.
I can't think of the name of the movie. My favorite movie. I can't think of the guy name, but he predicted. I'm sure you've seen the movie. You know, with the water rising, temperature of water rising. Then they had the ice age, and basically portions of America, all the way down to about Georgia was basically all ice, and then we had to go to Mexico. I can't.
Yeah, I can't help you there.
I can't think of the name of it, but it's similar to what you're saying. It's you know,
it's gonna be bad.
Yeah,
it's gonna be bad, and there's nothing we're gonna be able to do about it. It's gonna be, you know, New York City's possibly under ice, but most of Canada will be, and most of Northern Europe will be. It's gonna be horrific. But these are things we should be more worried about that than we are a slight bit of warming.
Yeah.
And actually, if you want to get into the climate apocalypse events, we could talk about that.
Sure.
Yeah. So your listeners and viewers here, they know about all the things that have been predicted, right? Rising oceans.
Yeah.
Forest fires. Heat waves.
Yes.
Droughts. Desertification. Increasing toenail fungus. I even read 2 weeks ago, there was an article about it's going to make toads dumber. I didn't know that was possible. But, I mean, it's just crazy stuff. But the good news is, if we look at what's actually happening, not what's forecast, all of those things are based on climate models that can't model climate. Climate models, according to John Christie in his testimony before Congress, overestimate the warming used for models compared to actual warming 2.5 times and 3 times in the tropics. So, but not only that, even if it warmed that much, there's nothing that says that it's going to be lead to these catastrophic events, because it hasn't in the past. During the medieval warming period, the Roman warm period, the Minoan warm period, it was significantly warmer today, and the human condition and people flourish. So the main thing that's helping us is actually climate change itself, that's leading to a decrease in much of this. And one of the main drivers in this is an increase in soil moisture content. In the book, I capture a great chart from NASA showing the greening of the earth. It's showing that up to 50% of the earth is what they call greening. In other words, there's been a vegetation increase for the last 30 years based on NASA satellites. Only 4% of the earth is what they're calling desertification or browning. So we got up to 50% of the earth is improving in vegetation and greening, and only 4%. So in climate change, there will be winners and losers. But if the vast majority of the earth is improving and only a small percentage is not, That's a really good thing. And this greening is driven both by increasing temperatures and rising CO2. Increasing temperatures mean that more water vapor can be incorporated in the atmosphere, which leads to more precipitation, which leads to more soil moisture. Increasing CO2 leads to increasing CO2 fertilization effect, which means that plants don't have to breathe in and out. It's what we call transpire. They don't need to transpire as much, and that's where they lose most of the moisture in the plant. So if they're not losing moisture, they're not needing to suck it up out of the ground as much. So they're leaving more moisture in the soil. And that's what the experts tell us is driving this soil moisture increase. And it's that soil moisture increase that's driving down things like wildfires, forest fires, heat waves, and the like, and also drought. So these things are good. One of the greatest, the most important, impactful, what we can see from the increasing soil moisture and the increasing precipitation is the great change in the Western Sahara. It's called the Sahel Desert. Do you hear my cat in the background?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
I'm sorry.
Usually it's a dog. Usually it's a dog.
He's 19,
usually
he's 19 years old. I thought I closed the door.
Oh, usually it's a dog in my background, so don't worry about it.
I heard it this afternoon. So, sorry about it. But the Western Sahara, the Sahel Desert, is turning into a lush grassland. And there's actually gazelles, all types of animals are moving back in there. Even amphibians are moving back into the Western Sahara. And the experts in that attribute it to climate change. They attribute it to rising temperature with more precipitation. And let me get rid of this cat here. Get out of here.
That's okay.
Let me throw a book at it here. By the way, that's what my book looks like, and this is what it looks like when it gets thrown at a cat. There it goes. Okay.
Oh, you might get some hate mail. Stop. You might get...
he's 19 years old. When a cat's old enough to join the Marine Corps, he's old enough to get a book thrown at him.
19-year-old cat.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyhow, so that's that. So it's rising temperatures, increasing CO2, benefiting the planet, helping us green the planet.
Okay. Hello, you there? Oh.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Now I want to get back to the inconvenient. One of Al Gore and these other individuals is, one of the things that I did here was that there was money to be made to talk about this global warming and catastrophes. I mean, and that's why they were pushing certain things, because people that come to their conferences, seminars, making millions. These countries are interested in, oh my God, what's going to happen? Can you come to my country? Can you really investigate certain things? So we know that's that's what was told to me. That was and I read some I was looking at some documentaries that money was a big factor in pushing the global warming or global cooling.
Yeah, that's a good question. I deal with a lot of the aspects of that. That's a good question. What is driving that? Or what I hear a lot is, why are they lying to us? And my first quote in the book is from H.L. Mencken, where he talks about imaginary hobgoblins of alarm that governments need to make up so that people accept harmful regulations and laws that they otherwise would not be ready to accept. They need to keep the population alarmed and from these imaginary hobgoblins. And I refer back to those throughout the book. So yeah, there is a lot of money to be made in this, but I think the main thing is, what is it? Is it an anti-capitalist agenda? What they're going to be doing is, Bjorn Lomborg from the University of Copenhagen estimates that there'll be $100 trillion in lost wealth if the Paris Climate Accord were fully adopted. And that'll mainly be a transfer of wealth from the Western civilizations, and mainly the United States, to the third world. These are things we can't really, they'll be economically harmful to the Western world and to the developed nations.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Tell our audience, who is this organization? What do they stand for?
What, the IPCC?
Yes.
Yeah, the IPCC is developed to advance this notion of a human-caused warming effect that's going to lead to catastrophic effects. A lot of this is driven by Dr. Michael Mann from Penn State, who has been proven to have falsified his data. That he used what's called the hockey stick chart of temperature, which purported to show 900 years of pretty much flat temperature until we got to the 20th century, and then it skyrocketed. It completely wiped out the medieval warm period and the Little Ice Age. Thousands of historical documents about that captured that we know that the medieval warm period was warmer than today. Just the very fact that we've got Vikings still buried deeply in the permafrost. They colonized Greenland during the medieval warming period. It was a lot warmer there. They were farming. In the Little Ice Age, we knew that the River Thames froze solid fairly commonly. The last time that happened was 1812. So we didn't have a period of constant temperature like Dr. Michael Mann says. It varied pretty constantly. And the one thing I always say about temperature is the one constant about temperature is it's never constant. It's going up and down and up and down and up and down, and sometimes severely up and sometimes severely down. But those drivers that were driving it certainly didn't stop functioning at the beginning of the 20th century.
What makes the climate go severely up or severely down? It's like what is it in the climate, or things that shift in on the planet or solar? What makes
the big glacial cycles are driven on, I don't want to go too geeky on here, they're called Milankovitch cycles. They're run on 100,000 year periods, and it has to do with the Earth's orbit, the wobbles of the Earth and the eccentricity of its orbit. They're the big drivers causing and leading to the ice ages. But in the last 11,000 years, we've seen temperature rise and fall and rise and fall and rise and fall. And actually, there's been a recent discovery made that explains it. There's this recently discovered, there's a star in the middle of our solar system that was discovered called the sun. And it's one of the main drivers. We know that when it's not very active, when the magnetic storms die down, we get very cooling effects on Earth. And when they build up, we get warmer effects. There's pretty good correlation there. The Maunder minimum, the coldest part of the Little Ice Age, was called the Maunder minimum because of the lack of solar activity, and it caused terrible cold. You recall the cold of George Washington and his troops at Valley Forge. That was coming out of the Maunder minimum. So these things, it's not completely understood, but it's certainly not had anything to do with carbon dioxide.
Yeah, like wow. So you were at CPAC on this past Saturday. Was you there just for what, one day, or was all 3 or 4 days at CPAC?
No, I had a booth. Selling my book. We had a lot of great contacts. Actually, a lot of people came up that saw me on Tucker Carlson or previously borrowed a book. And one of the most interesting, a little boy who was maybe in 7th grade, he'd come up with his dad and his mom. And his dad started telling me, he says, his boy got my book for Christmas and just loved it.
Wow.
And he saw me walking by, and he grabbed his dad and he says, "There's the man that wrote that book. There's the man that wrote that book." And he made him come over, and I made him buy a new book to autograph.
Oh, okay.
I didn't give him one.
Oh, wow.
He was cute, but he wasn't that cute. But yeah, CPAC was great. Got to meet a lot of good people, including yourself.
Oh yeah, when I looked at your book, and you sent me the website, I said, wow, I got to have you on my show, because I have a lot of conservative or independents, whether they're liberal, they watch they watch the Facebook live show, and we send it out to all the different groups on Facebook, and especially a lot of Trump groups and veteran groups, and we send it out to everybody, conservatives, and I know that conservatives really, you was on Fox and Friends, so I know that a lot of conservatives are really like your book. And I remember, there was certain things with Donald Trump talked about global warming. And did you hear that quote when he quoted about, listen, global warming and the coldness?
Yeah, they actually Brian Kilmeade was sitting in for Tucker Carlson
yeah.
that day, and Brian Kilmeade is a huge fan of the book. Mm-hmm. He's had me on his show several times, and he was sitting in for Tucker, so he called me up, and that led into that with the Tucker Carlson, mm-hmm. and asking me about that. But Donald Trump's got a copy of the book. I got a note back that I think was signed from him.
Wow.
We know that Scott Pruitt, he's got 3 copies of the book I sent him, mm-hmm. and I got a handwritten note back from Ryan Zinke, Secretary of the Interior, thanking me for the book and quoting from the book, so I know he read it. So we get this, it's important and impactful. We get this out to people. I know there are a couple congressmen in Pennsylvania that are watching this right now, and I've gotten in the hands of people, at least in the Pennsylvania legislature here. And also the U.S. congressmen have this in hand.
Oh, so you said they're watching the show right now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, wow. Hello out there. So, why is it that the liberals, they're stuck on this stupidness? They're stuck on stupid. And, it's like, the liberals believe Al Gore. And the conservatives are over on one side saying, okay, these things are not true. This really is not happening. And they're buying your book and they're excited about it. I mean, what is it between the difference between the liberals and the conservatives and how they think? And is there liberal conservative groups out there, different scientists that are more liberal or more conservative?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
There are, but I'm sorry, repeat that question.
Well, okay, does politics play a role in whether you're a Democrat or Republican, a liberal or conservative, in getting the message out?
Yeah, typically the biggest supporters of global warming are Democrats and liberals, and I think conservatives have a healthy skepticism for anything that the government's trying to ram down their throats. And we're definitely having this rammed down our throats. Mm-hmm. They're conservative for a reason. They if the government's coming to them, telling them one thing constantly, I don't know about the rest of them, but I'm very skeptical of that. So there was a group at CPAC, I think it was the American Conservative Coalition, that was promoting green conservatism. They were promoting carbon credits, renewable energy, and I had a chance. These guys were off the reservation, man. They had drunk the Kool-Aid, mm-hmm. and they were no more conservative than Chuck Schumer.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, they were getting a lot of pushback down there.
Mm-hmm. And so where are you going next with the book? Are you going to any more television shows, colleges, universities? What's next for you in the book?
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of radio. I was on with Trevor Carey today in Fresno, California. I'll be on with Lars Larson tomorrow evening, which is a huge radio. I think he's got 180 radio stations, mostly in the West. He's out of Portland, doing a lot of that. I expect to be back on with the Fox network here shortly. Mm-hmm. We're building and building, trying to get things moving, trying to sell some more books, trying to get the word out. And if your listeners, the website's inconvenientfacts.xyz, mm-hmm. and a promo code is 1776 for $5 off if they want to buy it.
Yes, I'm definitely going to get the book and talk more about it. And I definitely got to have you on the show again. And it's and maybe come to New Jersey. New Jersey is a blue state, and it's so.
I travel. I'm going to travel.
But we have a lot of conservatives and Republicans in the state. We elected Christie. Yeah. So.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And not so much. Hey, but I'll be going out to Columbus next week to speak at the Ohio Oil and Gas Association meeting. They're actually buying 800 books from me.
Wow. Wow. How many books have you sold so far?
About 7,500.
7,500. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, we just got a second printing of another 10,000. We ran out.
Wow.
And oh yeah.
Can they get the book online or
yeah,
eBay or well, I mean
Amazon, Barnes
yeah.
Noble, or my website.
Yeah.
Amazon, if you don't know, really takes it to the authors. They take 55% off the top.
Yeah, buy it from you, directly from you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, buy it directly from you.
Right. And how much time do we have left here?
We got a few more minutes. So, is there anything you want to tell the audience? And
yeah, let's talk about polar bears.
Polar bears. I love polar bears.
So, you've heard how they've been disappearing, right? Well, I've got Susan Crockford, who's probably one of the top polar bear experts in the world. I've got her chart of polar bear populations. She's studied them. As it turns out, it's pretty tough to measure.
Hello.
That was my wife calling me, and I told her not to. So, but polar bears have been increasing in the size for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
We've been heard about the decline in the polar bear population,
mm-hmm.
and that's just not happening. The interesting study came out. They wanted to look at bears in the high ice loss area versus bears where there is not much ice loss, with the expectation that there'd be a great drop in the areas where there was high ice loss. They found just the opposite. The bears were fat and happy. The bears in the high ice loss area were actually significantly larger, healthier by every aspect that they looked at.
Mm-hmm.
The sacks were heavier, larger litters, better survival rates, and it was kind of funny that at the end of there was a PowerPoint that the woman that studied did it, and she says, "How are we going to message this to the public?" Right?
Yeah.
That what they found. They didn't find at all what they were looking for. Is just completely the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe the simple bare necessities may not include ice.
So these climate people I assume they're pushing this whole fear factor. They have pushed it out through the past, I guess, 15, 20 years, the fear factor, and it's really sad they have to use fear to scare people to believing in this global warming and global cooling at one time. So they've done a hell of a thing with pushing the fear factor.
Yeah, they have, and we get it every day. Just crazy stories about islands that are disappearing. And as a geologist, I know a lot of the stories and why there are islands that are disappearing. Some of them are due to erosion. Some are due because they're sinking. Most of the Gulf Coast is actually sinking due to the dewatering of the sediments along the coast.
Mm-hmm.
Along the coast, there's dewatering that are leading areas to be settled. There's also areas that are increasing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we mentioned about the UN making their prediction about the 50 million climate refugees. They made another prediction in 2015 that there'd be 50 million climate refugees from those low-lying islands by 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we get to 2020 and I do another look, we're going to see the population actually expanded.
Wow.
So, I don't know why there's a real push to get this out there and to scare the people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on my show, the Onfire show, and I definitely want to have you on again sometime. This is one of my good interviews, favorite interview. One of my favorite interviews, having you on.
All right, well, let me, next time I do it, I won't have the light behind me.
Okay, next time we'll have better lighting. But,
all right.
Give everybody your website again, one more time.
Inconvenientfacts.xyz.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And go buy my book.
Gregory Wrightstone, Inconvenient Facts. And it's important that people know the truth about what's really happening to our climate. And the truth, and there's a lot of falsehood, and I just believe that it's just hard. It's just don't understand why individuals, these global, call it global nuts, they want to push fear in the people. And when I tell people on the show is that, go out, get the book, educate yourselves, and find the truth. And a lot of people, they're not looking for truth. They're just watching something on television and not fact searching.
Yeah, well, this book is extremely readable.
Mm-hmm.
It targets non-scientists. I wrote it for non-scientists. It's all fact and science based, but it's not so overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Ken Matthews from WHB, he sits in for Rush, called it the single best book on climate change he's ever read.
All right.
And he reads a lot, so I was blown away by that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. And, you know, and I hope you sell millions of books. You know, that's important. That means that people get a hand, you know, get your book, read it, and find the truth out for themselves, to search, you know, search the truth, and not just believe everything, you know, especially Al Gore says, and all these global nuts, and this pushing this global warming and before it was global cooling. So I'd like to thank you for coming on my show, Mr. Gregory Wrightstone. And,
got it right.
It's been enjoyable. So I
thank you, sir.
I thank you for coming on the show. You have a great day, and I will give you a call next couple of days. But I definitely want to have you on again.
You got it.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye. Hello, I am Daryl McKell-Brooks, your host of the Onfire Show. I'd like to thank you all for watching. This is a great show, and I promise people, audience, that, you know, I would have, you know, scientists on. I would have people who are educated and talking about some serious issues. And, you know, and I'm trying my best to provide you with a great quality show and great guests that have a interest in what's happening around our country and around our world. I want to inform you to let you know about the Onfire tour. We need help. We need your support. We just only raised $450. And this Onfire tour, we're inner city. We're going into the inner city areas around the country, and we're going to talk about issues on conservatism, education, prison reform. We're going to talk about the Constitution and what the Constitution can do for inner city areas. We're going to talk about peace, love, you know, and try to inspire the people in the city, whether African Americans, white, just who are just tired and fed up of what's happening with the politics of their cities. And you know, there are people that are very suffering in inner city areas, and you know, the opiate problem, addiction. There's a lot of things that are suffering. We have kids that are graduating from the 12th grade with a 4th, 5th grade reading level, and they can't get jobs to take care of themselves and their family. And, you know, there's a lot of different serious issues, and we'll be doing Facebook Live, and so we're going April 2nd. And I'm going to give you the list. We have 2 new people that's going on. We are myself, Daryl McKell-Brooks, Ty Turner, Tommy the Gun. We have the Minor Jamal, Maurice Delk, Jermaine Bastel. We just added 2 individuals. That's Sergeant Timothy Payne. He was on my show a few days ago, but he was the one that he went to Afghanistan, Iraq, and he was fighting, and he was blown up, and it was sad. He lost 2 of his legs in Iraq, and also he had issues with his limbs, with his arm, and I think he lost a finger in the left hand. But he goes around talking about you know, his life and his change and things that he accomplished, you know, and, you know, to the point of, you know, that he's been a success. He's going all around the country and talking about how he can motivate young people and about being peace. And he's a Christian. And he was a man who was on the brink of trying to commit suicide, not once or twice. And he is out here. He's doing for the Lord, and we want this guy. I invited him to come on to the tour. He's coming on the tour. And also Robert R. Rosenberry out of California. You know, he is a positive individual, positive brother. He supports the NRA. He's Second Amendment guy, and he's going to talk about issues about people that have the right to protect themselves, and who believes in the Second Amendment. So we're going to have a lot of different people. It's called 2008 Onfire, Taken to the Streets, Men with a Mission RV Tour. And like I said, we're going all across the country, and we need your support. So please go to www.gofundme.com/Onfire Tour. And, you know, we're leaving April 2nd to the 8th for that one. Wilmington, Delaware, Baltimore, Richmond, Virginia, Norfolk, Raleigh, North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina. Then we're going on another tour Columbia, Charleston, Savannah, Albany, Atlanta, and we're going to all these different states and cities where they have an inner city crisis, a violent crisis, and educational and crisis, and we're going to also talk about illegal immigration. What do they think? So we'll have our phones with us. We're going Facebook Living in these areas, and so we're going to ask these serious questions. You know, what do you feel about illegal immigration? What do you feel about your educational system? What do you think about the politics in your cities that continually failed you over and over again for the past 30 or 40 years, that we have a high crime rate, low education. We have kids that are parents that are suffering, and young kids that's going to jail more than ever before. And we need to really, we're going into these areas and having a serious discussion and bring some ideas, do some new different ideas and conservative ideas to these areas. So we, once again, please support. We need your support. We need your support tremendously. Go to www.gofundme.com/onfire tour. That's one word, Onfire tour. That's www.gofundme.com/onfire tour. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and this is a great show. And I had Mr. Gregory Wrightstone of Inconvenient Facts, his book. Go buy his book. This is the Onfire Show with your host, Daryl Brooks, and I thank you all. Have a great night, and I'm trying to have a great night. There's always obstacles and things, but we got to think with our heart and learn to love, and we're not perfect, and we make mistakes, and we have to know that God is with us, and you know, just keep on pushing and trying our best. You know, it's this world is testy, and people will test you, and you know, you just kind of keep on going on, and you know, you get frustrated sometimes, and ask God forgive us, and we keep on, because that's what life is about. Keep on keeping on and pushing and learning from your mistakes, and taking things to the next level, and know that you're not perfect. Know that you will make some mistakes and make more mistakes, but as long as we believe in God and God is with us, and we try and we may fail, you know, more than we'll definitely fail than we'll succeed, but keep trying, keep pushing, and know that God is with us. You know, Martin Luther King said it best in his quote. I always quote this at the end of the show, but he said that we're all caught up in this great inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny, and whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly, and that I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be unless I am what I ought to be. Then he quotes down the poet that says, no man is an island. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. Then he goes on to say that any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind. Therefore, never send to know whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. And that's where we should be as a people and as a country. Please go to www.gofundme.com/onfire tour. We need your help. We need your help. So please give us your support. Thank you. God bless. And I'm out. This is the Onfire Show with your host, Daryl Brooks. I can log out.